head is as heavy as the person that wears the crown. Who is the most stressed in the relationship? Head.
We hear all the time, men are supposed to lead, men are supposed to lead, but I don't think men are supposed to lead everything.
Ruth and Sam here. Welcome back to the NOIRPOISED podcast. This is our first full episode on video. So you're going to see the entire episode on YouTube, catch snippets on Instagram. Hope you're tuning in. Welcome to the NOIRPOISED podcast, where wisdom is power is more than just a motto.
It's our way of life. While we don't claim to have all the answers, we're dedicated to delving deeper into different topics through meaningful conversations. As a duo, we bring different viewpoints to the table, enriching our joint journey towards growth and poise.
Join us as we explore and unlearn to relearn while striving to navigate life with poise. Ruth and Sam here. Welcome back to the NOIRPOISED podcast. This is our first full episode on video. So you're going to see the entire episode on YouTube, catch snippets on Instagram. Hope you're tuning in.
Hopefully it doesn't take too much edits, but happy to be doing this.
Right. All right, so let's just get right into the conversation. You know us, we like to go directly into it. No small talk. So I saw this video online that got me thinking about the term leadership. And I wanted to ask you, do you think we misinterpret what the word lead means when it comes to marriage?
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to marriage, definitely.
Now, is it because of the video I showed you the other day, or was that your original?
I think the video you showed me the other day summarized it pretty well, but I think that's my original thought. Where we hear all the time, men are supposed to lead, but I don't think men are supposed to lead everything. And I think that's what the video highlighted, where we each have our individual roles. Yeah,
I agree with that. So if you've been listening for a while now, you know we like to throw definitions. It doesn't matter how simple the word is or how often we use it. But lead and leadership within a marriage is something that is constantly
debated.
Debated, especially now that I'm online with the podcast page. Like a lot of times I'll get like random things about relationships and stuff, because that was, some of our episodes prior. Society has different opinions, right? But we did have an episode where we discussed modern men versus modern women. So just want to give you guys the definition that is given for the term lead.
Okay.
Right? So lead. And I got to get used to looking at the camera because I feel like I'm not. So bear with me, guys. Y'all right there. Okay. So lead, basically as a noun, is the initiative to take an action, to be an example for others to follow. So when I think of that, I personally do think men lead and should lead within a marriage. That's my take on it. But I also understand that women lead in many other ways within the marriage and a home and a family dynamic. I think men are just the image of leadership for that family. Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
Okay. Yeah. So that's my take on it. What about you? What do you think?
I struggled with growing up, fitting the leadership role. As
Really?
crazy as that sounds.
Yeah, because I'm like, wait, weren't you a leader in church at like
I
2?
was. And when I think about it, I was
Bro,
when I
you've been
think about it,
preaching
I
since you were
was
like
a
2.
leader in not just in church, but throughout different aspects of my life. But like, I'm just going to paint the scene for you. There was one time I was in a church meeting, and you already know me. I'm very reserved. I don't like to talk unless like I see a reason to. I'm not just going to sit there and talk, whatever the case is. But I was in this meeting and I'm just listening. I'm still pretty new to church. And someone said, you need to speak up more. Like, I feel like God is telling you to speak up more. And at that point, I'm thinking like I had nothing to say. Like, there's no reason to speak, kind of thing. But that's an example of how I struggled to see myself as a leader. Because to me, leaders were always vocal. You always had an opinion. You always had somewhere where you wanted to go, what you wanted to do.
At least that's the
at
perception
least,
that people portrayed. Yeah.
At least that's, like you said, that's the idea or image that was put out there. So I didn't really see myself as a leader because I'm just more so reserved and like not really speaking up kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I got mature and I started growing up and I realized that my leadership shows through my action.
As it should.
And my leadership also showed through my calmness, where I had different people come up to me and say, you know, anytime you're around, I feel like there's a peace about you kind of thing. Or people that I didn't even really speak to will come up to me and say, you know what, I started doing X, Y, and Z because of you. Even in high school, I would have some friends, you know, say, I don't know, a curse word or whatever, and they'll look at me like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to. And I'm like,
that's so funny. Yeah.
I never told you not to. I never said that it offended me. It doesn't offend me kind of thing.
But the way you carried yourself triggered them to respect you in that way.
Right.
And I think that's ultimately what a leader is, right? Like, you don't have to always say things or do things that are like out in the open, but your character and the way that you carry yourself naturally inspires people to do better.
Right.
And it allows people to follow. That's basically what a leader is. You are the image that people follow.
Right.
And I think that's the role of a man within a family. You are that leader for the children to see an example and to follow. The girls to see that's the type of man that I have a goal of getting in the future. And the men to be like, that's who I want to be. That's what the man should be, in my opinion. And as a husband, I think it's the same thing. You're leading me in that way by being an example, or at least trying to be an example, because at the end of the day, there is a dynamic where you may be better at something and I may be better at another. You know what I mean? Like, we understand that, and it's a partnership.
Right.
But at the end of the day, in my opinion, men should lead in that aspect. But before we get carried away, we're going to play the video that I saw. And it may sound a little bit radical because he's very emotional about what he's saying. Well, emotional in the aspect, I should say.
Passionate, maybe?
Yeah, he's very passionate about what he's saying. So we're going to add it right here so you guys can see it and you'll see our reaction to it.
Who's the head of the household, the man or the woman?
The head is as heavy as the person that wears the crown. Who is the most stressed in the relationship? Who's dealing with high levels of anxiety in a relationship? Who's the most depressed in most of these relationships? It's the woman. Why? Because she's handling everything from paying the bills, taking care of the children, making sure the man is mentally okay, even though she's falling apart mentally, making sure the home is running how it's supposed to run, making sure the bills are paid. And she's doing this with the man and without a man. And we don't mention her raising these children, making sure they're going to school, making sure their grades is up, making sure they're learning and becoming more productive. The woman has always been the head of the household, and only weak men disagree with it, because when a man is the head of the household, he runs because of the responsibilities that come with it. It's not just providing. That doesn't make you the head of the household. The head of the household is the one that maintains the whole home, and the only one that has been doing that since the beginning of time is the woman. So yes, the woman is the head of the household, but the man should make sure she has a home to be the head of.
It is deep, but there's parts of it that I'm not going to lie. I was like, yeah, men do that too. I mean, it all boils down to what the relationship is, right? Every relationship is different. And while we may have our views, it's based on our experience in our relationship.
Right.
And other people have their own experience in their own relationships. So who am I to tell you how to run your household or how to run your relationship or your family? But traditionally, and even biblically, they say the men are head of households. The men are leaders. And I think the confusion that people may get with that is not necessarily who's leading and who's not, but more so, what is the household, right? Because in my opinion, men are the head of the family. You know what I mean? They are the leader. They're leading the family towards a certain direction. But I do agree with him when he says women are the head of the household, because, I mean, I don't know any family dynamic where it's otherwise, if we're completely honest. I think sometimes we say things out of habit or out of like culture because we've been trained to, and we think that's the case. But we've had a conversation before where even you admitted, like, yeah, the man protects and provides. That's it. That's all we do. You know what I mean? And of course that changes based on time. And I think society is in a different time now where women are also providing, and oddly enough, women sometimes are protecting. To each his own on how you want to run your family. But I do agree with him as far as women are the head of households. We maintain the home. We ensure all the nitty gritty detailed things are handled when it comes to the children and even the significant other. But there was a part he was like making sure the man is mentally stable. I agree. But I do think there's an importance in the man also making sure the woman is mentally stable. So it's kind of like, you know,
Right.
we both play our part. I think it's understanding our part that becomes a problem, because when there's no understanding on what your role is, that can often create that conflict on who's leading and who's this and who's that, or whatever the case is.
When I first heard the video, there's a lot of things that he said that I agreed with. Well, I actually agree with everything he said.
Yeah.
But when he said the whole weak men disagree, that point was like, I wonder to what level is that true? And as he was speaking, I just started thinking about how, you know, especially nowadays, there's always a battle between women don't know this or don't understand this. Men don't know this or understand this. But I think the people who would disagree with this, and I'm not trying to, you know, place any kind of judgment on anybody, are the people who are offended, because it seems like a statement like what he just made demeans men.
That's a good take.
It's sad that that's where the video ended, because I think the last part was the part that men should have listened to the most. Where he said, you have to make sure there's a home or a household for her.
Yes.
That right there, it's everything.
Right.
It reminded me of Ronaldo. He said how he gives his wife a crazy budget, like millions of dollars a month. And he's like, because this is my wife. She takes care of my family. So I give her money so she can do whatever activities with the kids. I give her money so she could pamper herself. I give her money so she makes sure the house is always, you know, up kept and everything. And I never forgot that, because just like he said, our job is to provide the opportunity.
And that's what the leader does.
Yeah, it's to provide an opportunity. And even if we look at historically, just from what he said, like from the beginning of time, men have always been the one to go out to war, you know, to farm or whatever the case is, because we know we're protecting something back at home.
Right.
We're going to go to war, we're going to go hunt, and we're going to give it to the woman, and the woman somehow works her magic. Like there's been so many times, like we had this conversation not too long ago where I say, you're the visionary. Like there's so many things that has happened in our lives, in our family, that I literally sit back like, I would have never thought about that. I would have never thought about that. But as women, I think women are more visionary people. They are able to sit down and say, what do I see for my family? While men, again,
they initiate the action.
Right.
And that's basically what the term said. You initiate the action and you become an example for them to follow.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I think men set the tone, but women make it happen.
Honestly, when you even think of nature, that makes sense. And I think it goes back to understanding what our roles are and then respecting them.
Right. Because
it's not about, oh, you're better, I'm better, this, that, and the third, but it's understanding that this is your role and this is mine. And this is what you do and this is what I do. But even when you think of nature, like I was saying, the man provides a semen and the woman creates a human.
Yeah.
Okay. When you think of gardening, you sow a seed for a plant, right? The plant grows. And if it's a fruit bearing plant, there are male flowers and there are female flowers. And I've explained this to you because sometimes it takes looking at nature to understand that, like, no, it's across the board, you know, but there are male flowers and there are female flowers. And in order for the female flower to produce an actual fruit, you need it to be pollinated. And the pollination that it needs is from the male flower. So I've showed you in the garden where something like a squash, you'll notice the female flower has like a little mini squash, which you would think it's gonna develop into a squash. But if it doesn't get pollinated by the male flower, it actually shrivels up and dies off and it falls off the plant. But when it does get pollinated, it becomes a fruit.
Yeah.
I say that to go back to what you said about the visionary thing is men kind of plant, they sow the seed in a sense, and the woman takes that seed and creates something bigger and better from it. I think that's really what the dynamic between a man and woman is in a marriage and in a household. I think it's just that. If we're using the case of you provide, right? You provide the finances and the woman takes that finances and goes to purchase items that the children need and what the home needs. And that's what it is to me across the board. That's the dynamic of a marriage, is understanding that you lead us and you are our example and you initiate the action.
Yeah.
But as the woman, I understand that while you're at the forefront in the battlefield, you're the one that's seen first because you are protecting the rest of us. I am paying attention to your left and right, and I'm holding you up, whether that's in the form of word of affirmation, whether that's making sure you're mentally stable. But my role as a woman, or I should say our role as a woman as women, in my opinion, is to do just that. While our men are in the forefront of the battlefield, that doesn't mean we're not on the battlefield with them.
Right.
We're protected because they're the first to initiate the action, but we're there to kind of do the back end work, operationally. Like if there's always going to be a CEO, right, who directs and delegates, and then there's a manager. There's a manager who gets dirty with the employees sometimes and will then lead the staff into the path that the CEO has for the company. And I think that's just what it is, in my opinion.
That's why I actually think sometimes the word lead is misleading. Yeah. Because people think of lead as there's one person that has to lead and everyone else is second. I'm like, no, even biblically, it's like when people get married, it's two become one. Like you guys are one. You're getting together to make certain decisions, and one person may take care of this aspect and another person takes care of another aspect, but it's still one unit kind of thing. But I think it becomes offensive when one person tries to downplay the role of the other. Like if as a man, if I'm looking at you and thinking you're not doing what I'm doing, you're not worrying about X, Y, and Z, like that's when you look at me like,
how disrespectful.
Right. And vice versa.
Right.
And I think that's where it becomes a problem.
I think that's where society is now, where we're not stopping to look at the other person's perspective, but we're so focused on how much we're doing and not stopping to think like they're doing things too in a different aspect. Like even when he said like men can't deal with the responsibility of being a leader, they run. I get what he's trying to say. I don't entirely agree with it because there is a form of responsibility that comes with your role. It's just not the same as mine.
Yeah.
And we've witnessed it, right?
Yeah.
There's been times where like, okay, I got to head out and do something. And I remember this was kind of like the beginning of our daughter being like a toddler or whatever. And you tried to cook, which was sweet. You tried to cook and like still be interactive with her and handle other things around and clean up and stuff like that. And you were just like, it's a lot. And sometimes it's simple things like that because that's what women are often doing. And in this day and age, they're also working the same job that men are working and then coming home and still filling those places. But we also have to admit there also are men that are working and coming home and saying, don't worry, babe, I got dinner. So I think it's just understanding how your dynamic works. But ultimately, men are the leaders. Women may be the head of the household in the sense of managing and maintaining it, but the man is the initiator. It doesn't work unless he's also on board.
Right. There's something else I wanted to mention as well is I think it's important that men and women flip roles sometimes just to humble themselves. Because like I said, I think I actually remember that. I don't remember where you went, but I was trying to, cook and, pay attention to her. And it gave me a newfound respect. Not that I didn't have respect before, but it's different being in the trenches and thinking like, okay, I remember when she was annoyed at this stage. I remember when she got frustrated at this stage, and I can see why now. So now next time when it happens, I'm going to have even more grace or even know exactly how to step in. I think a lot of times, if I'm just sitting here and watching your role, it looks easy.
And vice versa. Because I literally would think to myself, like, he's in his office talking to adults. So what's the problem? But it's humbling you got to stop and put yourself in the person's shoes and try to see like what frustrations or what little things that they may be going through in order to like respect their role.
It was Floyd Mayweather who said before, because everyone that he fights says, oh no, I was watching, I know exactly what to do. And he's like, it's different. When you're watching the audience, you can say like, oh yeah, I would have done this and that. But once you're in the ring,
it's a whole different
ball game. And I think that's the same thing with dynamics of relationships or marriages. It's easy for me to sit back and judge you and say, oh, you should have done this, or why don't you do that? But unless I'm in your shoes,
you really can't.
I really can't.
Vice versa. It's so true, because I think that's just a general thing, even outside of marriage. Like, you ever look at someone's situation and you're just like, why didn't they just do A, B, C, D.
Yeah.
And then life will put you in that situation.
Yeah.
And you'll be like, I get it now.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm at too. I think I said this to you, where I'm just like, yeah, I don't try to tell people what they should do or have an opinion as much as I used to in the past, because I understand that life will humble you real quick.
Yeah.
And even in a marriage, like, you just have to really learn to look at other people's perspectives.
Yeah.
And if I could say anything, because like I told you before, I call them gender wars.
Mm-hmm.
Legitimately, it feels like there's like a gender war
or something.
Right?
Yeah.
I feel like there's a gender war out there where people are fighting for acknowledgement, attention. So if there was a slight cut, it's because we ran out of memory and had to pause and go switch it.
We're trying, y'all. We're trying.
We really are. So to get back to the conversation, because I'm online now, I see these gender wars, which is what I call them, where the genders are seeking so much attention and acknowledgement. They at least they want acknowledgement and they want attention. So I feel like people are advocating for specific genders.
Yeah.
And in the process of doing so, they're demeaning the other.
Yeah.
And I think, or at least I believe, there's a way to do that without demeaning the other person. And I think that's why there's so much like clashing within marriages now, is because we have this feminism agenda that's taking over at this point. And we hear the term toxic masculinity. And to be honest with you, I had a different perception of what the word means, but that's another conversation. I was like, oh, that's what it means? That sounds like a normal man to me, but okay.
Yeah.
But point is, there's just these things occurring and it's getting in people's minds, and I think it's causing conflict within families and marriages, because we're being fed this toxic information about what the role should be, what it shouldn't be, what your man should be doing, what he shouldn't be doing, what your woman should be doing, what she shouldn't be doing. And at the end of the day, it all boils down to what works for us.
Right.
And if this works for us and we're thriving, let's continue on that route. Forget what everybody else doing and what everybody else say. The dynamic of marriage really boils down to the two individuals that are in that marriage. It has nothing to do with the outside world. Because of my faith, obviously, I take information from the Bible and information that I've learned in general over the years, but do what makes sense to you.
Right. Everyone is different. One of the things that I'm glad I never had to do, although I felt pressure to do it, especially coming from a Caribbean family, is I've never had to tell you what to do. Because I think that's one of the things that the misconceptions is, if you're a man and you're a leader in a relationship, you have to put your foot down sometimes. Like, you have to tell the woman no sometimes. And I've even seen it so where women kind of look for that.
Really?
Yeah. So I've had experiences where I've had family members tell me stuff like that. Like, I let you do whatever you want to do. And I'm thinking to myself, like, first of all, I would never be with someone who in my mind, I had to babysit.
Facts.
Like,
and that's both ways.
Right.
Like, we're both adults.
Yeah, but people see that as, no, a man sometimes got to tell a woman no. And that's about it.
Even if it doesn't make no sense. Because don't get me wrong, I'm going to be honest. I think there's times in a relationship where if you were to say no, I was to say no, I think it's fine with context.
Yeah.
Right? So we have a conversation about something. Let's say it's like a path one of us want to take. We have a conversation about it. And if you strongly disagree or you have a strong opinion about it, as your wife, I'm going to respect that. And I would assume that it's the same vice versa. But it's not necessarily like, I don't want you to do that. No, that's it. Period. It has to have context.
But I agree with the context, because we've had discussions, debates where you want to do something, I want to do something. We just talk about it and we come to a conclusion. But I've seen this predominantly in Caribbean relationships, but I've seen this in other relationships as well, where there'll be times a woman wants to do something and the guy just straight up says no. Like, we're not talking about it. It's just not happening. And society makes it seem like that's a leader. That's an alpha male. Like, he puts his foot down kind of thing. And I was just going to
say, I actually believe that is what a weak man is, because a lot of times when that's done, it's egotistic. It's not necessarily you're confident in who you are and you're taking pride in your role
Right.
as a leader. I think it's more so you're triggered to some extent, or you're offended, and you're reacting off of the offense, or you're just taking things to the head.
Yeah.
And so in that aspect, it reminds me of the video. He's like, weak men don't want to accept, you know, certain truths. I think that's what a weak man is. A lot of times people think weak men are like soft-spoken or whatever the case is. To me, weak men are the ones that are unable to be honest with themselves and operate off of ego rather than healthy pride.
Right.
Yeah. So that's just my take on it.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us. This was the first video episode. We hope you continue to come back. Follow us on Instagram, NOIRPOISED Podcast. We also have our YouTube, which you're probably watching the video content there now. And we can be found on all platforms as usual. So this was fun. I had fun.
Yeah.
I ain't gonna lie.
It wasn't as nerve-wracking as
yeah,
I
I thought I
it
was
would
gonna be nervous because
Yeah.
if you know me, you know I don't want to be on camera like that.
Same.
But it felt the way it does with audio, which like we kind of zone out the camera.
Yeah.
And
It felt authentic.
I like that.
Yeah.
And we're out. Thank you for spending your time with us. We hope you gained some knowledge today that'll promote poise in your life. We have new episodes uploaded every Thursday right here, same place, same time. Until next time, you can follow us on Instagram at NOIRPOISED Podcast to stay connected. That's NOIRPOISED Podcast. We'd love to hear your feedback.
And remember, your wisdom is power.